Our history books are filled with confident answers, but the deeper truth is far more mysterious. We are about to journey through 25 unsolved ancient mysteries that still baffle the world's top historians and archaeologists. By the end, you will see the past not as a settled story, but as a living puzzle filled with astonishing gaps. How did a civilization build a perfect stone calendar weighing 50 tons? And why did a thriving empire vanish almost overnight? These are not just curiosities, they are profound challenges to our entire timeline, evidence of lost knowledge and forgotten worlds. What does it say about us that our greatest monuments are often the ones we understand the least? Our journey begins with the most iconic and debated mystery of them all, the Great Pyramids of Giza. Standing on the desert plateau, the Great Pyramid of Khufu is a mountain of cut stone, originally reaching 481 feet into the Egyptian sky. Its scale is almost incomprehensible. It is composed of an estimated 2.3 million limestone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons, with some granite blocks in the inner chambers weighing a staggering 80 tons. The logistics alone are a nightmare for modern engineers to contemplate. How do you quarry, shape, transport, and place millions of stones with such flawless precision that the pyramid's sides are aligned to the cardinal points with an error of less than a fraction of a degree? The joints between the stones are so tight that you cannot slide a credit card between them. This is not just brute force. This is a level of precision engineering that should not exist for a society using copper tools and ropes. The pyramid is also a celestial observatory frozen in stone. Its air shafts point directly toward key stars in the ancient sky, and its perimeter, divided by twice its height, gives us the mathematical constant pi. The most persistent theory taught for generations involves massive straight ramps built from the desert floor, growing with the pyramid. But the volume of such a ramp would eventually rival the pyramid itself, and no archaeological trace of these colossal structures has ever been found. Alternative ideas suggest an internal spiral ramp within the pyramid's own growing structure, or the use of water channels to float the blocks into place. Yet each theory hits a wall of practical challenges or a lack of evidence. This vacuum of a definitive answer has fueled more speculative ideas, from the use of a now lost form of concrete to sound levitation, or even guidance from advanced ancient civilizations or otherworldly beings. The truth is, after centuries of study, we still do not have a single, proven blueprint for how this was accomplished. The Great Pyramid remains the ultimate symbol of human achievement and our profound ignorance, a perfect monument whose greatest secret is the method of its own birth. That same haunting question of purpose echoes across the English countryside, where another monument of impossible scale defies a simple explanation. On the vast, windswept Salisbury Plain stands Stonehenge, a ring of towering sarsen stones capped with massive lintels, surrounded by a complex landscape of earthworks and burial mounds. Built in stages over more than 1,000 years, beginning around 5,000 years ago, it is a puzzle constructed across generations. Its most famous feature is its alignment to the solstices. At dawn on the summer solstice, the rising sun shines directly into the heart of the monument, perfectly framed by the central stone archway. This is no accident. The builders went to extraordinary lengths to encode celestial events into the very bones of their structure, suggesting a deep, sacred connection to the cycles of the sun and moon, possibly even predicting eclipses. But was it a temple, an observatory, or something else entirely? One prominent theory paints it as a vast cemetery, a final resting place for a lineage of elite rulers, with the cremated remains of hundreds of people found on the site. Another suggests it was a Neolithic healing center, a Lourdes of its day, where the blue stones from distant Wales were believed to possess magical, curative properties. This leads to one of the most practical yet baffling aspects of the mystery, the transportation. Some of these blue stones weigh up to 4 tons each, and their only known source is the Preseli Hills in Wales, over 150 miles away. How did a prehistoric people without the wheel or draft animals move these monoliths across rivers, through forests, and over mountains? Theories range from a combination of sledges, rollers, and rafts to the controversial idea that glaciers deposited them closer during the last ice age, but no single explanation has won universal acceptance. This combination of celestial precision, immense effort, and enduring ritual use makes Stonehenge uniquely difficult to categorize. It was likely all of these things at different times: a sacred burial ground, a celestial calendar, and a site for powerful communal ceremonies that united the scattered tribes of ancient Britain. Yet its primary driving purpose, the original vision that sparked over a millennium of labor, remains just out of reach, a silent story written in stone and aligned with the stars, waiting for its final chapter to be understood. The stones of Stonehenge stand as a testament to a purpose we can only guess at, but some ancient mysteries are built from words alone, leaving no stone for us to find. Perhaps the most famous of all is the lost city of Atlantis, a story that has captivated humanity for over 2,000 years. Our sole source for this legend is the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who wrote about it in two of his dialogues around 360 BC. He describes it not as a myth, but as a true historical account passed down from wise statesmen. Atlantis, he claimed, was a formidable island empire located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. It was a marvel of engineering and power, with concentric rings of land and water, magnificent temples clad in precious metals, and a vast, wealthy population. Its people were initially noble, but they grew corrupt, arrogant, and militarily aggressive. As punishment from the gods, the entire island was swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune, vanishing forever beneath the waves. This vivid, tragic tale has sparked an endless global treasure hunt. Scholars and explorers have proposed countless locations for a real Atlantis. Some argue it was a memory of the Minoan civilization on the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, which was devastated by a colossal volcanic eruption around 1600 BC, causing tsunamis that could have inspired the sinking story. Others look to the Richat structure in Mauritania, a strange, circular geological formation visible from space, or to places like the Azores, the Bahamas, or even Antarctica. Every few years, a new theory emerges, pointing to underwater formations or aligning ancient maps with satellite imagery. Yet despite centuries of searching, not one shred of conclusive archaeological evidence has been found. No definitive ruins, artifacts, or inscriptions have been pulled from the ocean floor that match Plato's detailed description. So why does the search persist with such fervor? The power of Atlantis lies not in its potential reality, but in its profound symbolism. It serves as a perfect, haunting parable about the dangers of hubris, the fragility of even the greatest civilizations, and the raw, unforgiving power of nature. It is a ghost story for all of humanity, a warning that our towers and triumphs are temporary. This symbolic weight has cemented its place in our collective imagination, inspiring countless books, films, and theories. Atlantis endures because it represents the ultimate unanswered question, a blank space on the map that we can fill with our own dreams of lost glory and our own fears of cataclysm. It is the mystery that invites us to look at every unusual underwater scan and wonder, what if, from the sunken empire of legend, we travel to a high desert plateau in Peru, where an entire landscape was transformed into a canvas of unimaginable scale? Here, across nearly 200 square miles of the Pampa, Colorado, the ancient Nazca people created one of the most bewildering artistic projects in human history. Etched into the dark, stony desert crust by removing the top layer of reddish pebbles to reveal the lighter earth beneath, are hundreds of enormous geoglyphs. These are not small drawings, they are monumental figures, some stretching over 600 feet long, depicting a menagerie of creatures: a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey with an intricately coiled tail, a colossal whale, and even a strange humanoid figure often called the astronaut. Alongside these biomorphic shapes are vast geometric forms, miles-long straight lines, perfect triangles, trapezoids, and spirals that march across the arid plain. The central, haunting mystery of the Nazca Lines is that their full form is completely invisible from the ground. Walking among them, you would see only shallow trenches and disordered paths in the dirt. To appreciate the precise, graceful outline of a condor or a spider, you must be hundreds of feet in the air, a perspective utterly impossible for the people who created them between 200 BC and 600 AD. How did they achieve such precision without an aerial view? And more importantly, why? The how involves remarkable, low-tech ingenuity. Archaeologists have demonstrated that the Nazca could have used simple surveying techniques with wooden stakes and ropes to plot out the enormous designs. By creating small-scale models and using a consistent unit of measurement, teams of workers could have executed these plans section by section across the desert floor. The dry, windless climate of the region has preserved their work for millennia. The question of why, however, opens a vortex of theories. One prominent idea suggests the lines were a giant astronomical calendar, with certain glyphs and lines aligning with celestial events like solstice sunrises or the rising of important stars, potentially guiding agricultural cycles in a desperately arid land. Another, deeply rooted in the culture of the Nazca, points to water, or rather, the desperate lack of it. The lines may have been ritual pathways walked during ceremonies to plead with deities for life-giving water, with many of the trapezoids pointing toward distant mountains where precious runoff originated. The animal figures could have been totemic symbols, prayers made visible to the gods above. Then there is the more speculative theory, popularized in the 20th century, that the lines were landing strips or signals for ancient astronauts, extraterrestrial visitors whom the Nazca were trying to communicate with. While this captures the imagination, most scholars find it dismissive of the Nazca's own sophisticated culture and ingenuity. The truth likely lies in a complex spiritual and practical purpose. For the Nazca, the desert was not an empty space but a sacred one. By transforming it on a godlike scale, they were perhaps creating a permanent ritual landscape, an interface between their world and the realm of the deities who controlled water and fertility. The lines were not meant for human eyes, but for the eyes of the gods looking down from the sky. This act of faith, of creating immense beauty meant only for a divine audience, is what makes the Nazca lines so profoundly moving and so utterly mysterious. They are a testament to human devotion written on the very skin of the earth, a prayer in the form of a spider, visible only from heaven. While the Nazca lines were a prayer written across the desert for the gods to see, another ancient culture created a device meant to decode the very movements of those gods. In the year 1901, sponge divers off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera made a startling discovery. They were exploring a Roman-era shipwreck over 2,000 years old when they brought up a heavily corroded lump of bronze and wood from the silty floor. At first, it was set aside with other broken artifacts deemed unremarkable. Decades later, when scientists finally began to clean and X-ray the object, they were left utterly speechless. Inside that lump was a complex clockwork assembly of at least 30 interlocking bronze gear wheels, precisely cut with triangular teeth, all housed in a wooden frame about the size of a shoebox. They had discovered the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek analog computer of staggering sophistication. This was not a simple timepiece, it was a portable, hand-cranked cosmos. By turning a handle on the side, a user could advance a series of dials and pointers to calculate the positions of the Sun, the Moon, and likely the 5 known planets. It could predict lunar and solar eclipses with remarkable accuracy, and even accounted for the Moon's irregular orbit. One dial tracked the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. This single device condensed centuries of Babylonian astronomical data and Greek geometrical theory into a working mechanical model of the universe. Its inscriptions served as a detailed user manual explaining the celestial phenomena it could display. The level of miniaturization and mechanical complexity is comparable to that of an 18th century Swiss clock, yet it was built sometime between 260 BC and 80 BC. This fact is what creates the profound, unsettling mystery. Who, in the ancient world, possessed the knowledge to conceive and craft such a thing? The genius behind it implies a workshop tradition, a school of thought that understood differential gearing and celestial mechanics long before these concepts were formally rediscovered. We have names like Archimedes, who reportedly built planetaria, but no direct link. The deeper bafflement lies in its isolation. The Antikythera mechanism is a technological supernova, a flash of brilliance that appears to have no past and no future. No precursors have ever been found. No similar devices are mentioned in surviving texts with any technical detail. For over 1,000 years after its creation, nothing of comparable mechanical intricacy appears anywhere in the archaeological record. It is as if a single modern smartphone were found in a medieval castle, with no evidence of the industrial or scientific revolution required to produce it. This forces a haunting question. Was this device a unique masterpiece, the pinnacle of a lost tradition of ancient engineering that was wiped out by wars, fires, or the slow collapse of knowledge? Or was it a miraculous one-off, the product of a single, unparalleled genius whose workshop and students vanished into history? The Antikythera mechanism stands as a stark reminder that technological progress is not a guaranteed linear climb. It can be a fragile flame snuffed out for centuries, leaving behind only a corroded ghost to whisper of what was possible and what was so tragically lost. That ghost of lost knowledge haunts the vast, empty blue of the Pacific Ocean, where a different kind of genius was not lost but perfected in silence. The Polynesian expansion across the Pacific is arguably the greatest maritime achievement in human history, a mystery not of a single object but of an entire people conquering a third of our planet. With no compass, no sextant, and no written charts, they discovered and settled thousands of islands scattered across 10 million square miles of open ocean, from Hawaii to New Zealand to remote Easter Island. This was not accidental driftwood sailing. This was deliberate, repeated, long-distance colonization on a scale that seems to defy the technology of the time. Their vessels were double-hulled voyaging canoes, sometimes over 100 feet long, lashed together with coconut fiber rope and powered by woven sails. They carried entire communities with families, plants, and animals to start new lives on unseen shores. But the true magic was not in the canoe, it was in the mind of the navigator. These master wayfinders, known in Hawaiian as PWO, practiced a science of observation so deep it became a sixth sense. They memorized a celestial map, navigating by the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars. They learned to read the ocean itself, sensing subtle changes in swell patterns that rebounded from distant islands hundreds of miles away. They watched the flight paths of specific seabirds, knowing that certain species would fly out to fish at dawn and return to land at dusk, revealing the direction of invisible shores. They could taste the salinity of the water and note the kinds of debris floating in it. All of this knowledge was stored in chants, stories, and star compasses passed down through rigorous oral tradition. The mystery for modern historians is not if they did it, but exactly how they orchestrated this millennia-long odyssey. The timing and routes of this expansion are hotly debated. Did they sweep east from Tonga and Samoa in a rapid, purposeful wave around 1,200 years ago? Or was it a slower, more tentative process of exploration and return? The most tantalizing clue lies far to the east on the shores of South America. The sweet potato, a crop native to the Andes, was found thriving across Polynesia when Europeans arrived. The Polynesian word for it, kumara, is strikingly similar to the Quechua word kayumara. This suggests that Polynesian voyagers, perhaps from Easter Island, reached the coast of South America and back, a round trip of over 4,000 miles, centuries before Columbus crossed the Atlantic. This potential contact reshapes our entire understanding of pre-Columbian history. The true awe of the Polynesian mystery is its demonstration that advanced technology is not always about gears and steel. It can be a living library of environmental knowledge, a profound intimacy with wind, wave, and star. Their achievement stands as a quiet, monumental rebuke to the idea that the ancient world was a collection of isolated cultures. In the endless blue, they found a highway, and with nothing but memory and courage, they mapped a continent of islands hidden by the horizon. The silent canoes of the Polynesians charted a living map across the ocean, but another great civilization faced a collapse where the map itself seemed to vanish. Deep in the rainforests of Central America, the classic Maya built one of the most intellectually dazzling societies of the ancient world. By the 9th century, their city-states like Tikal, Palenque, and Capon were thriving metropolises, centers of staggering achievement. Their astronomers tracked celestial cycles with pinpoint accuracy, their mathematicians conceived of the concept of zero, and their artists covered towering stone pyramids with intricate carvings and hieroglyphs detailing the deeds of god-kings. Then, with shocking speed, it all stopped. Around 900 AD, the lights began to go out across the southern lowlands. The carving of grand monuments ceased mid-sentence. Palaces and temples were abandoned to the encroaching jungle. The great plazas, once throbbing with life and ceremony, fell silent. This was not a single event, but a rolling, century-long wave of failure that saw population levels plummet by an estimated 90%. The mystery is not that a civilization fell, but why this particular one, at its apparent peak, unraveled so completely and so permanently in its heartland. Historians have pieced together a perfect storm of catastrophes, yet the exact sequence remains maddeningly unclear. One of the most compelling suspects is a prolonged, devastating drought. Analysis of lakebed sediments and stalagmites from caves reveals that the region suffered a series of intense dry periods, some lasting decades, precisely during the collapse. For a society utterly dependent on seasonal rains to fill reservoirs and grow maize, a failure of the skies for generation after generation would have been apocalyptic. But drought alone does not explain the violence etched into the final monuments. The last inscriptions speak not of famine but of war. Previously rare scenes of bound captives and city conquests become common. It seems the Maya city-states, perhaps competing for dwindling resources, turned on each other in a spiral of endemic warfare, toppling the divine authority of their rulers. This political instability was compounded by the sheer weight of success. Centuries of growth may have pushed the population beyond what the fragile tropical soil could sustain, leading to deforestation and soil exhaustion. The very grandeur of the cities, requiring vast resources to maintain, may have become an impossible burden. The true enigma is that no single cause feels sufficient. Was it a climate disaster that sparked political murder, or did political fragmentation prevent a coordinated response to a changing climate? The collapse was also curiously selective. While the great southern cities were swallowed by roots and vines, Maya culture did not die. In the northern Yucatan Peninsula, cities like Chichén Itzá and later Mayapon rose to prominence, adapting and evolving. The people, their languages, and many of their traditions persisted, transformed but unbroken. This makes the Maya collapse not a simple story of extinction, but a profound and unsettling mystery of transformation. It forces us to ask a difficult question about our own world. How many threads must unravel before a complex society, no matter how brilliant, simply cannot hold its shape? The silent stones of Tikal are a monument not just to lost kings, but to the terrifying fragility of even the most enduring human achievements. A society can vanish beneath jungle vines, but a book can vanish into a different kind of oblivion, one of pure incomprehension. In the hushed halls of Yale University's Voynich Rare Book Library rests a volume that has defied understanding for centuries. Known as the Voynich Manuscript, it is arguably the world's most deliberately puzzling book. Its 240 fragile vellum pages are filled from edge to edge with a flowing, unknown script, a language that looks vaguely familiar yet remains utterly unreadable. Not a single word of it has ever been conclusively matched to any known alphabet or tongue. This bizarre text is accompanied by illustrations that are somehow even more confounding. There are page after page of fantastical plants, lush and detailed, but none correspond to any known species on Earth. Their roots are twisted, their leaves oddly proportioned, as if drawn from a botanist's dream or a distant alien world. Other sections feature intricate astrological diagrams with zodiac-like symbols arranged in complex concentric circles. Then there are the most famous images, often called the balneological section, which show plump, nude women bathing in or connected by a strange network of green, tube-like structures, suggesting some mysterious biological or alchemical process. Since its modern rediscovery in 1912 by book dealer Wilfred Voynich, this manuscript has been a siren call for the world's top cryptographers and linguists. Teams from both world wars, including American and British codebreakers fresh from defeating the Enigma machine, have turned their formidable skills to cracking its secrets. They have applied frequency analysis, statistical models, and every known decipherment technique. Some have claimed fleeting victories, proposing it as a coded form of Latin, Hebrew, or a lost dialect, but none of these solutions have held up to scrutiny or been accepted by the scholarly community. The text possesses a statistical structure similar to a natural language, with word lengths and character repetitions that feel ordered, not random, which only deepens the frustration. So what is it? The theories are as strange as the book itself. The simplest explanation is that it is an elaborate, centuries-old hoax, a meaningless creation designed to fool a wealthy patron. Yet the sheer consistency and volume of the work, the cost of the vellum and ink, argue against a mere forgery. Others believe it is written in a genuine but extinct language, perhaps a constructed one, created to record secret knowledge. The most tantalizing idea is that it represents a unique, unknown system of natural philosophy, a pre-scientific attempt to document herbal medicine, astronomy, and human biology through a symbolic lens we have simply lost the key to. Its complete, elegant resistance to every analytical tool we throw at it is the very heart of the mystery. The Voynich manuscript is a locked door in the library of human history. We can see the shape of the keyhole, we can hear faint sounds from the other side, but the door itself will not budge, guarding its secrets with a silence that feels almost intentional. A locked book guards its secrets with ink and vellum, but a forest of silent stones refuses to speak at all. On the windswept coast of Brittany in northwestern France, near the village of Carnac, lies the most dense concentration of standing stones on the planet. It is not a single circle, but a sprawling, orderly army of granite sentinels. Over 3,000 prehistoric menhirs, some towering over 20 feet tall, are arranged in astonishingly straight rows that march across the landscape for nearly 4 kilometers. Walking among the Voynich alignments, the largest of these groupings, is an experience that defies easy description. You are surrounded by a silent regiment of stone, 11 converging rows containing 1,099 stones, stretching toward the horizon like a petrified military formation from a forgotten age. The scale is not just impressive, it is deliberately overwhelming, a project that would have required generations of coordinated labor, all to erect these rough-hewn pillars in meticulous lines. The immediate, haunting question is why. What possible purpose could justify moving and planting thousands of multi-ton stones with such geometric precision? One of the most compelling theories looks to the sky. Archaeoastronomers have noted that the primary axis of the alignments points toward the sunrise at the summer solstice, suggesting the entire complex could have functioned as a colossal calendar or celestial observatory. The stones might have served as fixed sightlines to track the movements of the sun and moon, marking seasons and predicting eclipses for the farming communities that built them beginning around 4500 BC. Others see a profound religious purpose, envisioning the rows as a sacred processional way, a temple without a roof where rituals were performed among the stones, perhaps to honor deities of the earth or ancestors. The stones themselves, emerging from the ground, could have been seen as manifestations of spiritual power. A more practical theory suggests they were territorial markers, a bold statement of identity and control over the landscape by a powerful tribal coalition. Yet another fascinating idea proposes a connection to seismic activity, that the stones were placed on geological fault lines as a primitive system to detect earth tremors, though this remains highly speculative. The deepest layer of the mystery, however, lies in what is not there. Unlike Stonehenge or other megalithic sites, the Karnak alignments are curiously clean. Archaeologists have found almost no associated artifacts, no burial mounds within the immediate rows, no deposits of precious objects, no clear altars. This absence is deafening. It deprives us of the usual clues that hint at ceremony or daily use. The builders left behind no trash, no trinkets, no direct signs of why they came here. This silence makes their intentions utterly opaque. We see the result of a colossal, shared will, but the thought behind it has evaporated entirely. The Karnak stones stand as a pure expression of purpose stripped of its context, a monumental question mark carved from granite. They remind us that some ancient minds sought order not in buildings, but in lines, creating a geometry on the land so vast and deliberate that its meaning, lost for millennia, still vibrates in the empty spaces between the stones. While the stones of Karnak stand in silent, ordered rows, another ancient artifact sits quietly in a museum, whispering a secret that could rewrite the history of technology. Discovered in 1936 in a village near Baghdad, this unassuming object is known as the Baghdad Battery. It dates from the Parthian period, sometime between 200 BC and 200 AD. At first glance, it looks like a simple clay jar about 5 inches tall, but its contents are what sparked a firestorm of debate. Inside the jar, sealed with an asphalt plug, was a rolled copper cylinder, and within that cylinder, an iron rod. The components were isolated from each other by the asphalt stopper, and the jar showed signs of corrosion from an acidic liquid like vinegar or wine. To a modern eye, this assembly bears a striking resemblance to the basic components of a galvanic cell, a simple battery. If the jar was filled with an acidic electrolyte, the chemical reaction between the dissimilar metals, the iron and the copper, would have generated a small electric current, perhaps around 1 volt. The theory, first proposed in the 1940s, is as tantalizing as it is controversial. Could the Parthians have stumbled upon the principles of electricity? Proponents suggest a practical, if modest, application: electroplating. A weak current from several such cells connected together could have been used to deposit a thin layer of gold or silver onto another metal object, like a statue or jewelry, a practice known from the region. This would explain the existence of exquisitely gilded artifacts from the era that show no solder marks. It presents a vision of ancient craftsmen using primitive batteries in their workshops, a secret technique lost to time. However, the majority of archaeologists and historians remain deeply skeptical. Their counter-argument is straightforward. The object lacks any of the contextual evidence we would expect to find with a technological device. No wires, electrodes, or connected cells have ever been found alongside it. No contemporary texts, diagrams, or even legends describe anything resembling electrical experimentation. The most common alternative explanation is far more mundane. The jar was simply a secure storage vessel for precious scrolls. The copper cylinder would have held a rolled parchment or papyrus. The iron rod might have been a decorative or structural element, and the asphalt seal would have protected the contents from moisture and insects. Many similar jars without the metal components have been found used for exactly this purpose. This creates the core of the mystery, an unresolvable clash of interpretations. Is the Baghdad battery a profound anomaly, a single surviving clue to a forgotten spark of electrochemical knowledge? Or is it merely a storage pot that we, with our modern perspective, cannot help but see through the lens of our own technology, projecting a battery onto a simple jar? The artifact itself offers no further answers. It sits at the perfect intersection of possibility and coincidence, a puzzle where the most exciting explanation and the most boring one are equally plausible. It forces us to confront a difficult question about how history is written. Do we only believe in ancient technologies when we find overwhelming, repeated evidence? Or could genuine breakthroughs have flickered into existence in isolated workshops, leaving behind only a ghost of a chance, a clay pot that looks for all the world like a battery, waiting 2,000 years for someone to wonder if it could be turned on? A battery is a concept we understand, but a mountain hollowed out by human hands for no clear purpose defies our very logic. In 1992, in the quiet village of Longyu in Zhejiang province, China, a local farmer decided to pump the water out of a small, deep pond he had always known. As the water level dropped, an impossible sight was revealed. This was no natural pond. The walls that emerged were not rough stone, but smooth, perfectly angled surfaces, carved with a series of parallel chisel marks in a uniform, sweeping pattern. The farmer and his neighbors, stunned, began to drain other similar ponds in the area. One by one, they uncovered not caves, but something far more deliberate. To date, 24 of these colossal subterranean halls have been discovered, each one an architectural marvel carved by hand from solid sandstone. The scale is almost physically painful to comprehend. The largest of these caverns covers an area of over 12,000 square meters, with pillars reaching heights of 100 feet to support the ceiling. The walls, floors, and enormous support pillars are all finished with the same meticulous parallel tool markings at a consistent 60-degree angle, a signature of the builders that covers every single surface. This is not a haphazard digging project. This is precision engineering on a monstrous scale. Archaeologists estimate that to create these 24 caverns, nearly 1 million cubic meters of stone had to be quarried, shaped, and removed. That is a volume of rock equivalent to building the Great Pyramid of Giza twice over, and this is where the first layer of the mystery thickens into utter bafflement. Where did all that rock go? 1 million cubic meters of sandstone is not a pile of gravel you can hide. It is a mountain in its own right. Yet no massive spoil heaps, no nearby hills constructed from the debris, no evidence of the stone being used to build a city or roads has ever been found in the surrounding region. It simply vanished from the archaeological record as if it were never excavated. The caves themselves deepen the puzzle. Despite their immaculate, finished appearance, they show no signs of ever being lived in. No soot marks from torches or fires blacken the ceilings. No artifacts, no pottery shards, no tools, no inscriptions, no burial remains have been found inside. They are starkly, eerily empty. This complete absence of the usual debris of human habitation suggests they were not homes, not tombs, not storage facilities, nor even secret temples for regular ritual use. They were built, finished with incredible care, and then apparently abandoned to be slowly filled with groundwater. Who could have possibly undertaken such a back-breaking, generation-spanning project, and for what conceivable purpose? The construction method itself offers no easy answers. The consistent tool marks suggest a large, organized workforce using standardized techniques, but the caves bear no resemblance to any known mining operation from any period in Chinese history. The precision of the angles and the sheer ambition point to a powerful, centralized authority, yet not a single scroll, stele, or folk legend from the region's long-written history ever mentions the carving of these underground palaces. They are a historical ghost, a colossal physical fact with no paper trail. Theories range from the tombs of a lost dynasty to ancient quarries for a nearby city that was never built to vast ceremonial spaces for a forgotten religion. Some have even speculated they were imperial storage barns, though the lack of access for carts and the pristine walls argue against it. The Longyu Caves stand as a monument to pure, inexplicable effort. They force us to confront a possibility that unsettles our tidy historical narratives, that a society capable of such a vast public work could simply disappear from memory, leaving behind only these silent, drowned halls as a testament to a purpose we may never decipher. The silent, empty halls of the Longyu Caves are a mystery of forgotten purpose, but another artifact offers a map to a world we thought could not be known. Housed in the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul is a fragment of a larger world map, drawn on gazelle skin in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis. At first glance, it is a beautiful, expected product of its age, blending the known coasts of Europe, Africa, and the newly whispered of lands to the west. But a closer look at its southern edge has sparked a controversy that challenges our entire understanding of exploration history. There, below the Atlantic Ocean, lies a rough landmass that bears a startling, unsettling resemblance to the coastline of Antarctica, a continent that would not be officially discovered for another 300 years. Even more incredibly, this coastline appears to be depicted not as it is today, buried under miles of ice, but as it might look if that ice was stripped away, revealing the true topography of the continent beneath. This single detail has fueled one of the most enduring speculative mysteries in cartography. Did Piri Reis have access to source maps so ancient that they were drawn in a pre-glacial period, when Antarctica was last ice-free millions of years ago? In his own extensive notes on the map, Piri Reis openly credits his work to many source maps, including those from Arab, Portuguese, and even what he calls ancient Greek sources. He specifically mentions using a map drawn by Christopher Columbus, which is now lost. This admission shows he was a compiler, not a first-hand explorer of these distant shores. The proponents of the lost source theory argue that the accurate placement of the Andes Mountains and the detailed, uncannily precise rendering of the Amazon River basin, information not available to European cartographers for decades, point to a repository of advanced geographical knowledge that filtered down through the ages. They see the Antarctic coastline as the final, stunning clue that an advanced seafaring civilization possessed the ability to map the world in a distant, warmer epoch. Mainstream historians and cartographers, however, offer a more grounded, though no less fascinating, explanation. They point out that the map is also filled with legendary islands and speculative landmasses common to the period, like the mythical island of Antikythera. The southern continent, they argue, is far more likely to be a cartographic coincidence, a hypothetical Great Southern Land, or Terra Australis, that geographers had believed must exist to balance the northern continent since the time of Ptolemy. The shape's resemblance to Antarctica's true coast could be a result of the map's artistic stylization and the natural limitations of Portolan chart construction, which often led to distorted, mirrored coastlines. Furthermore, the ice-free detail is hotly disputed, with many scholars seeing only a generic, invented landmass that happens to align with our modern knowledge in a way that feels too significant to ignore. This is the heart of the Piri Reis enigma, a collision between an extraordinary coincidence and a paradigm-shattering possibility. The map is undeniably a masterpiece of its time, blending cutting-edge reportage from Portuguese and Spanish sailors with the lingering ghosts of medieval geography. Its true mystery lies in that blend. It forces us to ask where the line is between a lucky guess and a transmitted memory, Is the southern land a scholar's educated hypothesis, or is it the faded, copied echo of a map drawn so long ago that the continent it depicted was still green? The Piri Reis map does not give us answers. Instead, it offers a tantalizing glimpse into the fluid, uncertain world of early modern knowledge, where every new discovery was filtered through the whispers of the very old, leaving us to wonder what other secrets might have been lost in the fire, the flood, or the slow decay of parchment. Deep in the humid jungles of Costa Rica's Diquis Delta, a different kind of geometry hides beneath the ferns and vines. Scattered across the landscape are hundreds of stone spheres, some as small as a baseball, others as massive as a small car, weighing up to 16 tons. They are not rough boulders, they are astonishingly precise, carved from hard granodiorite with such skill that their surfaces approach near perfect roundness, their diameters varying by less than a centimeter. When first uncovered by banana company workers clearing land in the 1930s, they seemed like geological impossibilities, marbles for a forgotten giant. The immediate practical mystery is one of manufacture and movement. The pre-Columbian cultures of the region, who created these spheres between 600 and 1500 AD, had no metal tools harder than the stone they were shaping. Archaeologists believe they achieved this perfection through a meticulous, generations-long process. Workers likely selected boulders, then used heat from fires to fracture and weaken the surface before painstakingly pecking and grinding them into shape with other stones, perhaps using sand and water as an abrasive. The symmetry was likely checked with cords or wooden gauges, but once created, how were these multi-ton spheres moved miles through dense jungle and across rivers to their final locations? The most plausible theory involves a combination of log rollers, rope, and immense communal effort, pulling the spheres on wooden sledges along cleared paths. Yet the sheer number of spheres and the energy required to position them speaks to a society with a powerful, unified purpose. But what was that purpose? The spheres were often found arranged in groups, sometimes in straight lines, broad avenues, or in triangular and parabolic patterns. This has led some to propose they were astronomical markers, their alignments pointing to solstice sunrises or significant stars, turning the landscape into a cosmic map. Others see them as ultimate status symbols, the ancient equivalent of a luxury car parked on the lawn, with the largest spheres denoting the most powerful chiefs or families. Their groupings might have marked important territorial boundaries, sacred ceremonial spaces, or the approaches to elite dwellings. A more symbolic theory suggests they represent celestial bodies, the sun, moon, or even the planets, with their groupings modeling cosmological beliefs. The final, poignant layer of the mystery is not their creation but their concealment. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, the spheres were already disappearing. The indigenous people, perhaps to protect their sacred objects from desecration or to hide their cultural wealth, deliberately buried many of the spheres, rolling them into deep pits and covering them with earth. This act of cultural preservation turned the spheres into secrets, severing the living memory of their use and meaning. Today, many have been excavated and placed in parks or town squares, but removed from their original alignments, they become beautiful but silent orphans. Their true language, the reason for their specific numbers and arrangements, died with the people who buried them. The stone spheres are a paradox, objects of stunning mathematical precision whose purpose was so valued it had to be hidden from history, leaving us to admire their perfect forms while forever guessing at the perfect order they once represented. A perfect sphere can be hidden beneath the earth, but a map written on metal was meant to endure forever. Among the famous Dead Sea Scrolls discovered in caves near Qumran, one stands utterly apart. While the others are fragile parchment or papyrus filled with religious texts, this one is made of two joined sheets of corroded copper. Known as the Copper Scroll, it contains no psalms or prophecies. Instead, it reads like a frantic inventory from a royal treasurer's nightmare, or perhaps the ultimate treasure map. Written in a form of Hebrew different from the other scrolls, it lists 64 locations where staggering quantities of wealth are supposedly hidden. The descriptions are maddeningly specific yet vague. They speak of tithes, sacred vessels, and vast stores of precious metals buried in caves, under ruins, and near geographical landmarks. The quantities are not symbolic. They are brutally literal, listing specific weights like so many talents of gold and so many bars of silver. If taken at face value, the total hoard described amounts to tons of precious metal, a fortune that would dwarf most royal treasuries of the ancient world. The immediate, pulse-quickening question is whether any of it is real. Could this be a genuine record of hidden temple treasure, perhaps from Jerusalem, secreted away before the Roman destruction in 70 AD? The logistical reality of the described wealth is the first obstacle. The amounts of gold and silver are so enormous that scholars debate if the entire region could have even produced that much in that era. Transporting and hiding such a mass of material would have been a monumental, noisy operation, yet no other historical record mentions such an epic concealment. This has led many to believe the scroll is not a factual ledger, but an allegorical text, a piece of folklore, or a record of legendary treasures from various traditions compiled into one cryptic document. Yet the medium itself argues against metaphor. Why go to the extraordinary expense and difficulty of engraving a list on durable copper if it were merely a story? Copper was valuable and hard to work. This choice suggests the author believed the information was critically important and needed to survive for a long time, to be found and acted upon by someone in the future. For decades, treasure hunters and archaeologists have tried to decode its directions. The scroll mentions places like the Cave of the Column or the Mound of the Waters, but the landscape has changed dramatically over 2 millennia. Many of the presumed locations have been excavated, often turning up nothing but dust and disappointment. A few small, tantalizing discoveries, like a handful of period coins or artifacts in some caves, have fueled hope, but none have matched the spectacular descriptions of the scroll. The copper scroll thus exists in a state of perpetual tension between possibility and myth. It dangles the ultimate prize before us, a king's ransom in lost history, while simultaneously guarding its secrets with archaic place names and the relentless erosion of time. It taps into a very human dream, the dream of finding a map that leads to a forgotten fortune, but its true treasure may be more profound than gold. It is the enduring mystery itself, a puzzle etched in metal that challenges us to decide. Is this the careful record of a desperate act of preservation, or is it the ancient world's most elaborate and enduring work of fiction? A treasure map etched in copper speaks of hidden wealth, but the greatest treasure of the Andes was built in plain sight, a fortress that defies the very logic of stone. High above the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, Peru, the citadel of Sacsayhuaman stands as a monument of impossible engineering. Its most famous feature is not a building, but a series of 3 zigzagging defensive walls, built from limestone blocks so colossal they seem like the playthings of giants. Some of these polygonal stones weigh over 120 tons, yet they are not simply stacked. They are intricately, perfectly fitted together in a dizzying jigsaw puzzle pattern. The joints between these irregular, multi-angled blocks are so precise that you cannot insert a razor blade, a piece of paper, or even a single blade of grass between them. This was all accomplished without a single drop of mortar, relying solely on the flawless cut of the stone to create a structure that has withstood centuries of earthquakes that have leveled later Spanish colonial buildings in the valley below. The mystery begins with the most basic question: how? The quarry for this distinctive limestone was located over 2 miles away, across rugged, mountainous terrain. The Incas had no wheeled carts, no draft animals stronger than the llama, and no iron tools. The prevailing theory suggests that hundreds of workers used levers, ropes, and earthen ramps to coax these behemoths onto log rollers, inching them forward through a symphony of coordinated labor. But moving the stone is only half the puzzle. The shaping is where logic truly stumbles. How did Inca stonemasons achieve such insane precision? The surfaces are not just flat, they are subtly curved, with convex and concave faces that nestle into their neighbors with a snugness that seems to defy hand tools. One long-held romantic theory suggests the Inca possessed a lost plant-based solvent, a liquid that could temporarily soften the stone, allowing them to mold it like clay before it hardened again. While this captures the imagination, no archaeological or botanical evidence for such a substance has ever been found. A more grounded explanation involves meticulous, relentless hammering. Craftsmen might have used harder stones to peck at the surfaces, constantly testing the fit by using a clay or dust impression of the receiving stone, then grinding away the high points with sand and water. This process, repeated for months or years on a single block, could theoretically achieve the seamless joints. Yet, this method feels agonizingly slow for a project of such monumental scale, raising the question of how a civilization managed the sheer patience and man-hours required. The most compelling clue might lie in the Inca worldview itself. To them, stone was alive, a sacred entity. The perfect fit was not just an engineering goal, it was a spiritual act, a marriage between living rocks. This perspective might have driven a level of care and precision that seems irrational to our modern, efficiency-obsessed minds. The walls of Sacsayhuaman are not merely a fortress, they are a conversation with the mountain, a demonstration that the greatest strength does not come from forcing nature, but from understanding it so intimately that stone can be made to embrace stone, holding fast through the tremors of ages. While the stones of Sacsayhuaman speak of a culture in harmony with its mountains, a desert on the other side of the world held bodies that spoke a completely unexpected language. In the parched, salty sands of the Taklamakan Desert in western China, archaeologists made a discovery that stopped them cold. They were not uncovering typical Han Chinese remains. Instead, they pulled from the earth the mummified bodies of men, women, and children with strikingly European features, high noses, light hair, and deeply set eyes. These were the Tarim mummies, and they had been resting there for nearly 4,000 years, preserved not by elaborate embalming but by the dry, sterile desert air. Their clothing was just as astonishing, woven from wool in vivid plaid patterns that looked like they belonged in the Scottish Highlands, not the heart of Asia. Some wore tall, conical hats of felt, and one woman was buried with a basket of wheat and a small stone for grinding it. The immediate, disorienting question was impossible to ignore. What were people who looked like they had walked out of Bronze Age Europe doing in the Tarim Basin of what is now Xinjiang, China, over 2,000 years before the Silk Road was formally established? This was not a single lost traveler. This was an entire community, living, farming, and weaving in a region history books had long painted as an isolated backwater. The mystery of the Tarim mummies is a profound challenge to our maps of the ancient world. Their very presence suggests a web of migration and contact that was far earlier and more extensive than anyone had imagined. For decades, theories swirled. Were they lost to Charians, an Indo-European-speaking people mentioned in later texts? Were they nomadic herders from the Siberian steppes who drifted south? The most compelling answers came not from artifacts but from genetics. Recent DNA studies have revealed a stunning truth. These mummies were not recent migrants from the West. They were a largely isolated, local population with deep, ancient North Eurasian ancestry, a genetic signature linking them to hunter-gatherers from Siberia and Northern Europe. They were, in essence, the remnants of a very ancient branch of humanity that had settled in the Tarim Basin and thrived there for millennia, largely separate from the populations to the east and west. This genetic isolation makes their material culture even more fascinating. Their sophisticated weaving, their use of the wheel for carts, and their cultivation of both wheat and millet show they were not primitive. They were a successful, adapted people who created a unique fusion of technologies. The implications ripple through history. Their existence proves that the ingredients of what would become the Silk Road, wheat from the West, weaving techniques, and likely languages, were already present in the region thousands of years before the grand caravans of camels. It forces us to redraw the timeline of cultural exchange. China's development was not a story of pure, internal evolution suddenly interrupted by outside contact during the Han Dynasty. Instead, the Western frontiers were a vibrant, ancient melting pot. The Tarim mummies are silent witnesses to a forgotten chapter of human mobility. They tell us that the ancient world was not a collection of isolated islands, but a vast, slowly connecting network where ideas, genes, and fabrics could travel incredible distances, carried by people whose faces do not match the stories we once told about the land where they were found. While bodies lay preserved in the Tarim sands, a hilltop in southeastern Turkey held a secret that would shatter the timeline of civilization itself. For decades, archaeologists dismissed a curious mound called Göbekli Tepe as nothing more than a medieval cemetery. Then, in the 1990s, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt began to dig. What he unearthed was not a graveyard, but a temple complex of staggering age and ambition. Carved directly into the bedrock of the hill are a series of circular enclosures, each defined by massive, T-shaped limestone pillars. These pillars are not crude posts. They are monumental works of art, some standing 16 feet tall and weighing over 10 tons, intricately carved with a menagerie of predators and prey, foxes, scorpions, lions, and birds. The craftsmanship is sophisticated, deliberate, and powerful. But the true shock is not the artistry, it is the calendar. Radiocarbon dating places the construction of Göbekli Tepe at around 9,600 BC, making it over 11,000 years old. To grasp that number, consider this: it was built a staggering 6,000 years before Stonehenge and 5,000 years before the first pyramids of Egypt. This was not the work of a settled farming society. It was built by hunter-gatherers, people who supposedly lived in small, mobile bands, focused solely on day-to-day survival. This fact ignites the central, revolutionary mystery of Göbekli Tepe. According to the story we have told for generations, civilization followed a neat, logical sequence. First, humans discovered agriculture, which produced a food surplus. That surplus allowed people to settle in permanent villages. With settled life came specialization, hierarchy, and finally, the spare time and resources to build monumental architecture for religion and power. Göbekli Tepe violently inverts that sequence. Here we have the monumental architecture first. The grand, coordinated temples came before the farms, before the villages, before everything we thought defined a complex society. This forces a breathtaking question: what if it was the other way around? What if the need to build and maintain a sacred site like Göbekli Tepe is what actually drove the invention of agriculture? Imagine the logistics. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of hunter-gatherers had to be mobilized, fed, and coordinated for generations to quarry, carve, and erect these stone circles. You cannot feed a massive, permanent workforce with wild gazelle and scattered nuts. The demand for a reliable, predictable food source would have been immense and urgent. This pressure, the theory suggests, is what pushed people to begin cultivating wild grasses like einkorn wheat, which grew naturally in the hills nearby, and to herd wild animals like sheep and goats. Agriculture, then, was not a lucky discovery that led to temples. It may have been a necessary innovation to support temple building. Who could have commanded such a project? There is no evidence of kings, chieftains, or a rigid social class at Göbekli Tepe. No grand residences, no storage facilities for a ruling elite. This suggests the organizers were likely spiritual leaders, shamans or priests who could unite disparate bands of people from across the region through a shared, powerful belief system. The carvings offer the only glimpse into that belief world, a realm dominated by dangerous, powerful animals. This was not a gentle nature worship. It seems to be a veneration of a volatile, predatory cosmos, a spiritual confrontation with the forces of the wild that surrounded them. After centuries of use, the people of Göbekli Tepe did something as mysterious as building it. They deliberately buried the entire complex, filling the great stone circles with thousands of tons of soil and debris, preserving it perfectly for 12 millennia. Perhaps their beliefs changed or the social order that built it collapsed. Whatever the reason, they left behind a question carved in stone that challenges the very foundation of human history. Did we invent gods and build temples because we became farmers? Or did we become farmers because we first dreamed of gods and felt compelled to build them a house? Göbekli Tepe suggests our greatest leaps forward may not begin with full stomachs, but with a shared idea powerful enough to move mountains, or in this case, to carve them. Göbekli Tepe suggests civilization might have begun with a sacred vision, but on a remote island in the Pacific, a different kind of vision led to a haunting ecological parable. Isolated over 2,000 miles from the nearest continent, Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is home to nearly 900 massive stone statues called moai. These brooding figures, with their elongated noses, deep-set eyes, and solemn expressions, stand guard along the coastline, their backs to the sea as if watching over the island's interior. Carved from compressed volcanic ash at a single quarry, the largest of these statues towers over 30 feet tall and weighs a staggering 82 tons. The sheer scale of the moai is breathtaking, but the central, practical mystery has always been one of transportation. How did the Rapa Nui people, with a population that likely never exceeded 15,000, move these colossal figures miles across rugged terrain from the quarry to their final ceremonial platforms called ahu? For a long time, the dominant theory involved a combination of log rollers, sledges, and rope, with a large workforce laboriously pulling the statues horizontally across a prepared track. This method seemed logical, but it required an immense amount of timber, a resource that would prove tragically central to the island's story. Then, a compelling alternative emerged: the walking theory. Archaeologists experimented with a replica moai, using 3 teams of ropes to rock the statue side to side in a controlled shuffle. The results were astonishing, with a small group able to make a multi-ton statue appear to walk upright across the landscape. This method would use far less wood, relying on skill and rhythm rather than vast quantities of lumber. Yet, this theory is also contested, with critics pointing to the risk of catastrophic damage to the fragile stone figures and a lack of clear archaeological evidence for the specific rope configurations needed. The truth of transport may lie in a hybrid approach, perhaps using a wooden sledge or lubricated track for part of the journey, combined with upright maneuvering for final placement. But the mystery of the moai is inextricably tied to a far darker and more debated puzzle: the collapse of Rapa Nui society itself. The popular narrative, one taught for decades, is a stark cautionary tale. It says the islanders became obsessed with statue construction, engaging in a kind of cultural arms race between clans. To move the moai, they cut down the island's once lush palm forests to make rollers and ropes. This deforestation led to soil erosion, the loss of raw materials for canoes, and a collapse in bird and marine life. Starvation, warfare, and societal collapse followed, with the population crashing long before European contact. This story paints the Rapa Nui as the architects of their own doom, a powerful lesson in ecological hubris. However, recent archaeological and paleoecological research is challenging this simple narrative. New evidence suggests the story is far more complex and perhaps less about a sudden, self-inflicted ecocide. Pollen studies show the island's forests were already under stress from the natural arrival of the Polynesian rat, which ate palm nuts and prevented forest regeneration. Climate change may have also played a role, with prolonged droughts affecting the already fragile ecosystem. Furthermore, the idea of a massive pre-contact population collapse is being questioned. Evidence of sophisticated rock gardening and innovative agricultural techniques suggests the islanders adapted to their changing environment with remarkable resilience. The famous obsidian spear points found across the island, once seen as proof of brutal warfare, may have been primarily tools. The societal collapse that did occur might have been dramatically accelerated by the true catastrophe that arrived with European ships, slavery, disease, and cultural destruction. So, were the moai the cause of the collapse or its most magnificent symptom? The statues might represent not a foolish waste of resources, but the ultimate expression of a people's spiritual and political life, a ritual activity that bound the community together even as their environment changed around them. Their silent, imposing presence forces us to ask a difficult question. Are we too quick to blame ancient societies for their own downfall, crafting simple moral fables, when the real story is a tangled web of environmental change, cultural adaptation, and the brutal randomness of history? The moai do not answer, they only watch, guardians of a truth that is far more complicated and far more human than the parable we once believed. The solemn gaze of the moai watches over an island's complex fate, but deep within an Egyptian temple, a single carved image has sparked a debate that shines a very different kind of light on the past. In the crypts of the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, a relief carved during the Ptolemaic or Roman period shows a scene that, to a modern eye, looks astonishingly out of place. It depicts a large, elongated object resembling a lotus flower, inside of which a snake stretches its body forward in a straight line. This lotus bulb is held aloft by a priest, and it is connected by a cable-like line to a box on which a baboon, a symbol of the god Thoth, sits. To many who see it for the first time, the resemblance is immediate and electrifying. It looks uncannily like a giant, ancient light bulb, with the snake serving as the glowing filament, the lotus as the glass bulb, and the cable as the power cord leading to an energy source. This interpretation forms the core of the Dendera light mystery, a fringe theory suggesting the ancient Egyptians might have possessed, or at least conceptualized, a form of electric lighting. Proponents point to the absence of soot marks in many deep tomb and temple interiors, asking how such intricate artwork could have been executed in total darkness with only flickering torches or oil lamps. They see this relief as a technical diagram, a lost piece of knowledge passed down and stylized within the temple's sacred art. The idea is compelling because it taps into our desire to find lost technology, a concrete answer to a practical archaeological puzzle. However, the mainstream Egyptological explanation is both more symbolic and deeply rooted in the consistent language of Egyptian mythology. Scholars interpret the scene not as an instruction manual, but as a profound creation myth. In this reading, the lotus flower represents the primordial mound, the first thing to emerge from the watery chaos at the dawn of time. The snake is the cosmic serpent, a deity associated with creation and regeneration, often shown emerging from the lotus as a symbol of life bursting forth. The entire tableau is a ritual reenactment of this moment, with the priest holding the symbol of creation, connected to the divine knowledge of Thoth. This explanation fits seamlessly with thousands of other Egyptian artworks and texts that use similar symbolic motifs to describe the universe's origins. The mystery, therefore, lies not in the object itself, but in the chasm between two ways of seeing. Is the Dendera light a startling example of pareidolia, where our modern brains impose a familiar image, a light bulb, onto an ancient religious symbol? Or could it be a rare instance where a complex technological concept was encoded into mythology, a surviving whisper of a principle that was understood but not built? The frustrating and fascinating truth is that the relief exists in an evidential vacuum. No physical artifacts resembling light bulbs or generators have ever been found in Egypt. No texts describe electrical principles. The soot-free walls can be explained by clever use of mirrors to reflect sunlight, or by ventilated lamps whose smoke was carefully managed. Yet the theory persists with a stubborn life of its own because it speaks to a deeper, more haunting question. When we look at the achievements of the ancients, are we sometimes too quick to dismiss the possibility that their understanding of the natural world might have taken paths we have since forgotten? The Dendera relief does not give us a light bulb, but it does cast a long shadow of doubt, illuminating the delicate line between our interpretation of their symbols and the true, lost content of their knowledge. From the symbolic light of an Egyptian temple, we journey to a misty highland plateau in Laos where the earth itself is studded with stone giants. The Plain of Jars is exactly what its name suggests, a vast, haunting landscape scattered with thousands of colossal stone jars. Carved from sandstone and granite, these massive vessels lie in clusters across hundreds of square miles of the Zioncoke Plateau. Some are modest, standing only 3 feet tall, while others are true behemoths, reaching nearly 10 feet in height and weighing several tons. Their shapes are simple yet enigmatic, with most featuring a cylindrical form, a flat bottom, and a wide, open mouth, some still retaining their heavy stone lids. They were carved during the Southeast Asian Iron Age, somewhere between 500 BC and 500 AD, by a culture that left behind no written records, no grand cities, only these silent, monumental jars. The central, compelling mystery is as straightforward as it is baffling. What were they for? The most persistent theory, supported by early archaeological finds, is that they were elaborate burial urns. French researcher Madeleine Colony, who conducted the first major study in the 1930s, discovered human remains, burial goods like beads and pottery, and ash around some of the jars. This suggests a complex funerary practice where bodies may have been placed inside the jars to decompose, or perhaps the bones of the deceased were stored within them after a sky burial or cremation. The jars, in this view, are communal tombs, stone sentinels guarding the remains of an entire community across generations. Yet other theories challenge this somber purpose. Local legend tells a different story, one of celebration. According to folklore, a mythical race of giants used the jars to brew and store colossal quantities of rice wine, or lao lao, to celebrate a great military victory. This idea of fermentation vessels is not as far-fetched as it might seem. Similar, though smaller, stone jars have been used for fermenting rice wine in other parts of Asia. Could these have been the centerpieces of vast ritual feasts? Another practical suggestion is that they were simply giant storage containers, holding rainwater or food for ancient trade caravans traveling through the highlands. The truth may weave these threads together. The jars might have served multiple purposes across centuries, used for storage in life and for reverence in death. The mystery is tragically compounded by modern history. During the Vietnam War, the region was subjected to intense bombing, and the plateau remains one of the most heavily contaminated places on Earth, littered with unexploded ordnance. This deadly legacy has severely restricted archaeological access, making systematic excavation perilous and slow. Large areas remain completely unstudied, their secrets locked in the ground, guarded by dormant bombs. This danger means we have only scratched the surface of the site's potential. What if the jars we see are only the markers for something far more extensive hidden below, elaborate burial chambers or lost settlements? The culture that carved them remains nameless, its language, beliefs, and social structure silent. The Plain of Jars stands as a stark monument to dual obscurity, shrouded first by the passage of millennia and then by the scars of modern conflict. It is a place where the quest for ancient understanding is literally a walk through a minefield, a poignant reminder that some of history's greatest puzzles are not just waiting to be solved, but waiting to be safely approached. The silent jars of Laos are monuments to a purpose we can only guess at, but in the heart of California's Death Valley, stones move with a purpose we can now see. On the flat, cracked mud of Racetrack Playa, a dry lake bed surrounded by stark mountains, a seemingly impossible phenomenon occurs. Heavy rocks, some weighing over 700 pounds, slide across the landscape, leaving long, meandering trails etched into the sun-baked clay behind them. For over a century, these sailing stones baffled geologists and visitors alike. With no human or animal intervention, how could these boulders travel hundreds of yards, sometimes even changing direction, as if taking a leisurely stroll across the desert floor? Theories abounded, from powerful dust devils and hurricane-force winds to magnetic fields or even pranksters. The utter lack of witnesses made the mystery feel almost supernatural, a desert haunted by self-propelled stones. The breakthrough came not from complex instruments but from patience and modern observation. In 2011, a research team installed weather stations and time-lapse cameras around the playa. After years of waiting, they finally captured the elusive event on film. The secret was a perfect, delicate recipe of conditions. First, a rare rain must fall on the playa, creating a shallow, temporary pond. Then, on a cold winter night, that thin sheet of water must freeze into a large pane of ice, but not too thick. As the sun rises, the ice begins to break up into floating panels, some only a few millimeters thick. When a gentle, persistent wind of about 10 miles per hour pushes across the playa, these ice sheets act like invisible, giant hands. They nudge against the rocks, floating on a lubricating layer of meltwater, and slowly, imperceptibly, push the heavy stones across the soft mud below. The stones leave their now famous trails as they glide, a signature written in real time. This elegant solution, proven by science, solved the core mystery. Yet, in its resolution, a new layer of subtle wonder emerged. The specific conditions required are extraordinarily rare. A precise alignment of rain, freeze, and breeze that may only happen once every few years, and the movement is so slow it is invisible to the naked eye. Furthermore, not every detail is perfectly settled. Some of the trails show curves and sharp turns that are difficult to model precisely with the ice sheet theory alone. Do multiple ice panels catch the rocks at different angles? Do subtle variations in the playa's surface or the stone's shape cause these intricate paths? The sailing stones stand as a beautiful testament to how science works, patiently unraveling a seeming miracle into a comprehensible natural process. But they also remind us that understanding the mechanism does not strip away the magic, it merely transfers it. The magic is no longer in the moving rock, but in the exquisite, fragile choreography of desert rain, winter ice, and a morning breeze, a performance staged on a vast, empty lake bed for an audience that might not arrive for decades. It is a mystery that yielded but did not surrender all its secrets, proving that even when we find the answer, nature often keeps a little poetry for itself. Deep in the vault of the National Library of Sweden rests a book so massive it has its own legend. Known as the Codex Gigas, or the Giant Book, it is the largest surviving medieval manuscript in the world. Created in the early 13th century in a Bohemian monastery, it is a monster of vellum and ink weighing nearly 165 pounds. Its pages, made from the skins of an estimated 160 donkeys, are so large that 2 strong people are needed to lift it. Within its colossal covers lies a complete Latin Bible, major historical works, medical texts, and chillingly, a full-page, vividly colored illustration of the devil himself, seated alone in a barren landscape. This sinister portrait earned the tome its popular name, the Devil's Bible, and ignited a mystery that burns as brightly as its infamous image. How did this book come to be, and why does the Prince of Darkness hold such a prominent place within its holy pages? The most persistent legend offers a dramatic Faustian answer. It claims the Codex was the work of a single doomed monk, a scribe who had broken his monastic vows and was sentenced to be walled up alive. In desperation, he promised to create a book that would contain all human knowledge in a single night, a feat only possible, he vowed, with the help of Satan. As the story goes, the monk completed the impossible task, and in gratitude, or perhaps as a signature, he included the striking portrait of his infernal patron. This tale of a supernatural pact is a compelling ghost story, but the physical reality of the book is what makes the mystery truly compelling. Modern analysis of the handwriting reveals an astonishing consistency throughout the entire massive text. The ink, the letter forms, the spacing, all point to the work of a single, incredibly disciplined scribe. This does not prove a single night of writing, of course, but it does suggest one person dedicated years of their life to this solitary, monumental task. Consider the sheer physical toll. Just preparing the vellum would have been a years-long undertaking. Then, the scribe would have had to mix gallons of ink, rule every page for lines, and then copy every word with unwavering precision, likely working for 6 to 8 hours a day in dim natural light. The project would have taken an estimated 20 to 30 years of continuous, focused labor. This raises a profound human question far beyond any demonic pact. What kind of person undertakes such a life-consuming project? Was it an act of profound penance, a self-imposed sentence for a real or imagined sin? Was it an attempt to achieve spiritual perfection through the ultimate act of devotion, copying the Word of God? Or was it simply the life's work of a monk whose extraordinary skill and obsessive focus found expression in this one tangible, breathtaking achievement? The inclusion of the devil's portrait adds another layer. In the medieval mind, the devil was not a symbol to be hidden, but a powerful spiritual reality to be confronted. His image in a religious text served as a stark reminder of the constant battle between good and evil, a visual sermon on the consequences of sin. It may have been intended to inspire fear, humility, and ultimately, stronger faith in the God who triumphs over such darkness. The Codex Gigas, therefore, stands at a crossroads between myth and muscle, between a sensational legend and the tangible evidence of one human being's almost superhuman dedication. It forces us to wonder which is more astonishing, the story of a demonic deal completed in a night, or the true story of a man who willingly spent decades of his one precious life in silent, painstaking labor, leaving behind not his name, but a book so large and strange it could only be explained by a bargain with the devil. The dedication of a single monk pales before the legacy of a man who forged an empire from horseback and whose final resting place has become a ghost in the landscape. The search for the tomb of Genghis Khan is the ultimate historical treasure hunt, a pursuit that has tantalized explorers and scholars for nearly 800 years. The Mongol emperor, born Temujin, united the warring tribes of the steppe and unleashed a wave of conquest that created the largest contiguous land empire in history. Yet, when he died in 1227, his followers executed a plan of secrecy so absolute it has erased his physical monument from the earth. According to the accounts passed down, his funeral procession was a death march. Anyone unlucky enough to cross its path was killed on the spot to eliminate witnesses. The soldiers who built the tomb were then executed by a second group of soldiers, who were themselves killed to protect the secret. The final, chilling act of concealment was geological. Legends say a river was diverted to flow over the burial site, forever sealing the Khan beneath water and silt, or that a forest was planted atop the grave, or that 1,000 horses were ridden back and forth across the location to trample any trace of disturbance. The goal was not just to hide a body, but to prevent the desecration of a sacred site that held the soul of the Mongol nation. This culture of secrecy transforms the search from an archaeological dig into a detective story written in whispers and shadows. For centuries, the tomb's location was a forbidden knowledge protected by the descendants of the Mongols and the sheer vastness of the landscape. Modern expeditions armed with technology have tried to pierce this veil. Teams have scoured the suspected region around the sacred mountain of Berkhan Koldun in Mongolia, using ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, and drones to scan for anomalies. In 2014, a project claimed to have found a promising site, but the Mongolian government, citing cultural sensitivity and laws protecting historical sites, has restricted excavation. The mystery endures not merely because of the potential for untold riches, though the tomb is fabled to hold the plunder of empires. It persists because finding it could rewrite the final chapter of Genghis Khan's life and the early Mongol Empire. The tomb would not be an empty chamber. It would be a time capsule from the peak of Mongol power, likely containing artifacts, texts, and personal effects that could shed light on the man behind the myth, his beliefs, his family, and the true nature of his court. It could clarify the circumstances of his death and the immediate succession struggle that followed. Yet, the very secrecy that protects the tomb speaks to a powerful cultural truth. For many Mongols, the grave is not meant to be found. It is a spiritual anchor, a part of the living landscape that should remain undisturbed. This creates a profound tension between historical curiosity and deep-seated tradition. The tomb of Genghis Khan thus exists in two realms at once, as a physical location somewhere in the Mongolian heartland, and as a permanent idea in the world of archaeology, a siren call of discovery that may forever remain unanswered out of respect for the final, unbreakable command of the great Khan himself. A ruler's tomb is hidden by design, but some objects hide their purpose simply by being too ordinary to explain. Scattered across the former territories of the Roman Empire from Britain to Hungary are some of archaeology's most whimsical and baffling finds, the Roman dodecahedra. These are small, hollow objects cast from bronze, each one a geometric marvel. They feature 12 flat, pentagonal faces with a circular hole of varying size in the center of each face. At every corner where 5 faces meet sits a small, spherical knob. They range in size from a golf ball to a large grapefruit, and no two surviving examples are exactly alike. The craftsmanship is consistently fine, suggesting they were valued items, yet they are ghosts in the historical record. Not a single Roman text, letter, inventory, or fresco ever describes or depicts them. They are found without context in military forts, public baths, and private homes, offering no clue as to why they were made or how they were used. This complete silence has turned them into a blank canvas for the imagination, and the theories are as varied as the dodecahedra themselves. One popular idea casts them as simple candlestick holders. A candle could be placed inside, with wax drips catching on the knobs and light shining out through the different-sized holes. Yet many lack any soot or wax residue, and their often delicate construction seems ill-suited for holding a burning, dripping candle. Another suggestion is that they were dice for a complex game of chance, but their uneven weight distribution and the lack of numbers or symbols make this unlikely. Could they have been tools? Some propose they were used for surveying, with staffs placed through opposite holes to measure angles or distances for Roman engineering projects. Others have suggested, quite seriously, that they were knitting gauges for creating Roman gloves, with the knobs used to size finger holes. The most compelling theories, however, lean into the symbolic. The dodecahedron is a shape revered in sacred geometry, associated with the cosmos and the ether. These objects may have been religious or ritual items, used for divination or as symbols of knowledge held by a specific cult or guild, their meaning so specialized it was never written down. The charming, enduring mystery of the Roman dodecahedra lies in their paradoxical nature. They are too carefully made to be trivial, yet too common and varied to be singular treasures. They were clearly important enough to be crafted and carried across an empire, but not important enough for anyone to bother writing about. They represent a slice of daily Roman life that has completely evaporated from memory, a tool, a toy, or a talisman whose function was so obvious to its owners that explaining it would have been like explaining a doorknob. They remind us that history is not just made of grand monuments and epic battles, but of countless quiet, practical mysteries, objects that were once held in someone's hand for a purpose we can only guess at, connecting us across centuries through a shared, frustrating, and delightful sense of wonder. The whimsical mystery of the Roman dodecahedra is a puzzle of forgotten use, but one final ancient script is a mystery of forgotten words, a silence that has lasted for millennia. Among the great early civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt, the Indus Valley civilization flourished along the banks of the Indus and Ghaggar-Hakra rivers in what is now Pakistan and northwest India from around 3300 BC to 1300 BC. It was a society of staggering sophistication, with planned cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro boasting advanced drainage systems, standardized bricks, and vast granaries. Yet, for all its evident complexity and reach, this civilization speaks to us in whispers, not shouts. Its voice is captured in a script that has stubbornly resisted all attempts at translation, a writing system that remains the last great undeciphered language of the ancient world. The script itself is found on small, square seals, typically made of steatite stone, as well as on pottery, copper tablets, and a few other objects. These inscriptions are hauntingly brief, averaging just 4 or 5 symbols in length, with the longest known example containing only 26 signs. The symbols are elegant and stylized, often depicting animals like the iconic unicorn-like bull, as well as human figures, trees, and abstract shapes. They were clearly a system of writing, not mere decoration, as the symbols show consistency and repetition across hundreds of miles and centuries of use. This was a functional script, likely used for administration, trade, and perhaps religious purposes by a society that engaged in long-distance commerce and managed large urban populations. The central, frustrating challenge of decipherment is twofold. First, and most critically, we lack a bilingual text, a Rosetta Stone for the Indus Valley. The famous key that unlocked Egyptian hieroglyphs was a single slab bearing the same decree in Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphic script. For the Indus script, no such parallel text exists. We have no known king's name, no familiar myth, no list of goods in a language we understand to use as a starting point. The script exists in a vacuum with no proven linguistic relative. Scholars do not even agree on what language family it might represent, with theories ranging from an early form of Dravidian to a completely lost language isolate. The second major obstacle is the sheer brevity of the samples. With no lengthy narratives, no royal chronicles, or legal codes to analyze, cryptographers are left trying to crack a code with only the tiniest of fragments. It is like trying to reconstruct an entire novel from a handful of random book titles. Are the seals property tags naming merchants or deities? Are they ritual statements or administrative notations for quantities of goods? Without longer texts, statistical analysis of symbol frequency and position can only suggest possibilities, not confirm meanings. The stakes of this linguistic mystery are incredibly high. Deciphering the Indus script would be like turning on a light in a dark room. It would instantly transform our understanding of this enigmatic civilization. We could finally learn how they governed themselves without obvious palaces or monumental statues of kings. We could understand their religious beliefs beyond the tantalizing clues of ritual baths and figurines. We could read their trade records, learning the names of their cities, their products, and their trading partners across the Persian Gulf. Most importantly, we could hear their own words about their world, moving them from a silent archaeological culture to a people with a recorded voice. The continued failure to break this code means that one of humanity's first experiments in urban living remains fundamentally opaque to us. The people of the Indus Valley built cities that rivaled those of Egypt and Sumer, yet their thoughts, their stories, and their laws are sealed away behind a wall of elegant, unreadable symbols. Each carefully carved seal is a locked door, and behind it lies not just a name or a transaction, but the entire mind of a lost world waiting for a key that may never be found. From the silent script of the Indus Valley to the walking stones of the desert, these 25 enigmas form a constellation of questions across our shared past. We have wandered through landscapes of impossible scale, like the regimented stones of Karnak and the hollowed mountains of Longyu. We have held artifacts of baffling purpose, from the Baghdad Battery to the Roman dodecahedra, objects that defy simple categorization. We have witnessed the ghostly echoes of societies that vanished, like the classic Maya in their jungle cities and the builders of Göbekli Tepe who inverted history itself. We have stared at pages we cannot read, from the Voynich manuscript to the copper scroll, and at maps that seem to chart impossible knowledge. Each one, in its own way, is a crack in the foundation of our historical certainty. Together, they paint a portrait of the ancient world not as a linear march of progress, but as a tapestry of brilliant, disparate experiments, many of whose threads were cut or woven into patterns we no longer recognize. They testify to the staggering ingenuity of our ancestors, people who moved mountains of stone, crossed oceans by starlight, and encoded their understanding of the cosmos into everything from temple walls to handheld computers. Yet, these mysteries also humbly remind us of the vast, silent stretches on our timeline. For every confident chapter in our history books, there are paragraphs missing, pages torn out, entire libraries lost to fire, flood, and forgetting. These puzzles are not failures of archaeology. They are its very purpose, the magnetic north that pulls us toward deeper digging and wider thinking. They force us to stay curious, to question the stories we think we know, and to remain open to the possibility that the past was far stranger, more connected, and more inventive than we have dared to imagine. So, as we leave these 25 mysteries behind, a final question lingers. Which of these ancient riddles do you believe will be the next to fall? Will a new Rosetta Stone finally unlock the Indus Valley script? Will a lucky scan reveal the hidden chamber of Genghis Khan? Or will a patient scientist discover the true, mundane purpose of the dendrolite, closing one door of speculation forever? The future of the past is still being written. Share your theories in the comments below, and if you crave more journeys to the edges of history, be sure to subscribe. The greatest mystery, after all, is what we will uncover tomorrow.